So everyone, today we are speaking to Olivia James. Here she is. Olivia James is I was looking up your professional title, and of course, you're a performance specialist when it comes to public speaking anxiety. And I'll ask you for more. But one of the reasons why I really wanted to ask Olivia here today to talk to us is because she does specialize in that. And I will say the trauma as well of public speaking and what can happen, because it is, and when I work with people in public speaking, it's very much a case of dealing with some of the nerves. And there have been cases in the past where actually something the coaching that I do will unearth something very primal and deep rooted. And the thing is, how we show up and the way that we speak, the way that we present or have presence is so deeply connected to the core of who we are and our past experiences.
Mhm.
And when I've had it working with clients or getting people up on stage or working on the more of the presentation side, and you're dealing with their self-awareness as well, or their emotional intelligence, suddenly, poof, out of nowhere will pop up something that's been so deep rooted, and it's connected to so much of us. It's
Yes,
connected to the body, it's connected to and that's in turn connected to our mindset and how our thoughts are being curated in our brain. And this all really does have an impact to how we are effective and high performance
exactly.
in our role. So this is why I wanted to speak with you, Olivia, and bring you on, because I think there's so much value you can share. So can you tell us a little bit about you and your background?
Yeah, so my background is as a therapist, basically. I'm coming at this as a therapist. Been working with humans since about the mid 90s. Started out doing more body work, body-based stuff like massage and then some other sort of healing techniques and stuff. And then I realized that often there is so much emotion stored in the body. I went through some personal traumas. I got divorced, and I had a session with this woman who did this thing called tapping. Which is it looks really barking mad, and lots of people who do tapping are pretty mad because they get so over enthusiastic. But this was really my sort of gateway into like learning about the connection between the psychology and the body. And so, but my approach is always, uh, as a trauma therapist as well, as I added lots of different techniques of how to really deal with those deep traumas. So people that have got like PTSD, people, because often confidence issues stem from trauma. So that sort of my sort of approach now is really that this, you mentioned the word mindset just now. So mindset is this I this, it seems very kind of logical, but humans are not logical in the slightest. And so my sort of approach is really to look at who this person really is, and then look at where their triggers are. And you sort of mentioned that already. You start working with someone and you find out, wow, you know, they were their boss said something really, really horrible to them to undermine them, or they were bullied, or they have like a speaking issue, like they have a stammer or something. And so my approach is really to deal with all of that.
Mm.
The holistic, and the holistic can sound really candles and sandals, but basically that is what I do. So I'm a therapist. I'm trained in lots of what's known as alphabet therapy. So I could spout all these different qualifications at you. They probably wouldn't mean anything. But basically that's where I come from as a therapist and a coach.
Do you know, that's the thing. I always love the term when we say holistic, and I very much believe in this. Despite, especially because we're talking to quite a technical audience, there can be a little bit of an aversion to what we deem woo-woo.
Yeah.
But from a personal perspective, and professional, actually, I very much believe, I don't think I don't think it is woo-woo at all. It's actually almost quite clinical, the body is connected to the mind.
Exactly.
Mind is connected to the body.
Definitely.
And I've had personal what we've called like kind of even just physical trauma, I believe, can really have an impact, and it lurks beneath the
Or-
surface. You can think things have been resolved, but actually they've been padded over. And I was saying this actually this week. I was running a clubhouse room on emotional intelligence, and one of the things we were talking about is that the first two stages of emotional intelligence being, one, to recognize an emotion, and then two, to be able to monitor and manage it.
Yeah,
And I'm also just always really careful to say, that doesn't mean you can bury it. That doesn't mean you can ignore it and not deal with it. It means
exactly.
managing.
And then the other thing about that is, you're spot on, is this idea that we need to be positive all the time, and we just need to think good thoughts, and we need to think happy thoughts. I was just quoted in the Evening Standard in a piece about toxic positivity, because often when we're talking about things like confidence, um, there can be so much advice around, you just got to build, you just got to be unstoppable, you've got to be mentally tough and all this kind of stuff. And
Killing it. You got to be
without
killing it.
without sort of smashing it, without sort of dealing with those traumas, if you try and pile a load of confidence and kind of confident mindset on top of a wounded human being,
Mm.
it isn't going to work. It just isn't going to work as well as if you actually deal with some of that stuff. So when I'm working with somebody, we look at that stuff, and I don't dwell on it, and I don't. The other thing is, like, there's a lot of misunderstandings about when you've had a trauma related to, like, your confidence, that just talking about it will help you. Um, the brain is really complex. So we have this sort of this logical part and the language processing part, but often the traumas are stored like way deeper down in your system. And you mentioned the connection between the mind and the body. So there's this nerve called the vagus nerve that connects everything, which is getting a lot more attention now, and that is basically responsible for that moment when you go completely blank in a meeting, or you get completely blindsided, or somebody asks you a difficult question and you get snappy, like, and that's the level that you need to deal with. So this idea that you can sort of talk your way out of trauma. In my experience as a trauma therapist, having dealt with people with some serious issues, talking alone isn't the best way to help people with trauma, because the trauma is stored way lower down. And the second thing is, you do need to sort of address some of that negative stuff, but you don't have to have years of therapy, basically talk therapy. That isn't. So it's about acknowledging what's there, instead of this sort of like lovely sort of model of who we would like humans to be. Actually deal with how they actually are wired.
And that's the thing is, do you know, I think it's actually, there's a level of awareness. Like, we don't know sometimes when we're having that level of trauma, or when it's deep seated. And I've embarked on on coaching sessions where we're starting to go through the kind of program, and that first initial self-awareness issue, we talk about whatever their goal is, especially if it's speaking up or getting in front of people, and suddenly there's this like kind of flood. And at which point, that's when I'd actually go, do you know what, you need to do some work looking, kind of healing that wound, and just
Yes,
and that's when someone like you would come in
yes.
and really work with that. So could you tell us a bit more about, okay, someone is not feeling confident, they're struggling a little with the idea, they're missing out on opportunities on speaking in their organization or for their organization, even if it's just in the boardroom, or if it is kind of bigger sessions, or even just managing their own self-confidence.
Yes.
What is the first thing that they can look at, or that you would look at?
So the first thing is to really teach them how to manage those moments where they get triggered, and those moments when all of us can spin out. So somebody can look at us and we think, oh my God, they don't like us. And often it may not be even that. So often we have a lot of internal dialogue about, oh, everyone, they're looking at me, they don't like me, or, my boss doesn't think I'm worth, promoting or whatever. And we have all these conversations in our heads that are often nothing to do with reality. So it's about sort of recognizing that, and then finding ways to manage your own nervous system activations. So that moment where you have that internal cringe or that internal freeze, uh, there are techniques like the tapping thing I mentioned to you earlier on, that people can use really discreetly to help them sort of actually smooth everything down. Basically, it sends calming signals to the amygdala in the brain, which is your little inner smoke alarm that constantly kind of scans for danger. And it's a little bit like a car alarm that goes off every time a cat walks past. Most of the time, this sort of your alarm system is like a bit, it's erring on the side of caution. So it looks for danger where there isn't actually danger. So it's about managing, sort of calming that down a little bit so you can kind of deal with what actually is there rather than all this imagined stuff that may not even be there. So then you can actually, once that happens, you have more access to your prefrontal cortex, which is the logical bit of your brain that you need for decision making, and also that will then enable you to like learn the skills from somebody like you, so that when there is an opportunity, that not only that you know what to do, because without knowing what to do, you're not gonna look good if you don't know how to like stand, how to structure your speech, how to breathe, how to dress, all these things. With just with confidence, you need confidence and competence put together, basically.
Yeah, confidence and competence fit together. Uh, I was just in a discussion earlier today about so particularly in the finance function with technology coming in, there's a deeper work in analytics, and actually one of the struggles is how um, how the finance function can actually confidently communicate what the value of their work is, or what the value of certainly new technology and analytics, when potentially it's a bit, people can be a bit skeptical, and
Mhm.
that means that those businesses are going to fall behind or not have the right information to be able to drive really important decisions. So having that confidence, and if it's so vital. And on that note, actually, one of the things that you said earlier was about the trauma of being undermined or having your
Yes,
confidence knocked. Could you tell me more about that?
absolutely. Um, on your previous point, the other thing that, of course, that's really important when you're trying to sell like a new technology is really put yourself into the shoes of the person you're selling to. There's often, and that ability comes with the more regulated your nervous system is. So there's this, we're going back to this vagus nerve. So when your vagus nerve is in like a state of it's called ventral vagal, then it's able to actually to be curious about ideas and to really think about how does this other person feel. Other if it's not, then you're in basically fight or flight, freak out, I've got to protect everything, or freeze mode, which is for when you're exploring new markets and trying to persuade people of a new idea. You really need to have that empathy and that feeling of like, yes, I understand what your needs are, basically. So I think they're all connected. So when it comes to being undermined, some of the stories I could tell you of like senior people I've worked with who have been massively undermined by superiors and colleagues. That is quite unbelievable. And I know that we've just had International Women's Day, and some of the stories coming out on LinkedIn as well, where somebody's in a meeting and somebody says something incredibly sexist. So what happens there is often we will go into this freeze, and there is a part of us that we all have this sort of survival strategy called appeasement. So if a guy says something incredibly sexist to me in a meeting, like I might want to say, what the heck F did you just say? How effing dare you? This is a workplace. But of course, if I say that, I am the nutter and I am, the hysterical woman. So often what tends to happen, and this happens in situations of racism as well, often we kind of we go into this survival response called appeasement, where we try not to make a big deal of it. We might try and laugh it off because we know that to speak out or to retaliate would basically threaten our position in this system or in this company or whatever it might be. So often we will internalize this stuff and we won't actually react because we've worked out, usually wisely, that to say something, to react the way that we would, is actually dangerous on some level. So, and this stuff happens all the time, and I think a lot of this is at the root of the gender pay gap, the lack of representation at board level. Still, we've just had like the first, like there's we've just had some firsts when it comes to like all male boards, no longer in the 350, but still, like, we've got all this stuff. And what really drives me nuts, and lots of other people nuts as well, is that this idea that, oh, go on, women just have to be more confident and they just have to be more ambitious, and then they'll rise. Well, often there is so much of this, like this hidden sexism that happens, and that just to blame women and other marginalized groups for not leaning in enough just seems to be totally hitting the mark.
Do you think that's actually the same for in people who identify as being introverted as well? Because I see some of the same thing, which is when and particularly because in a world of like finance and technology, it is there is an assumption, we could say, but actually reflectively it's a bit 50-50 that those roles are taken by people who are introverted. And when you have, so there is this narrative that people, and especially, as you're just saying, women need to lean in, need to be more confident, need to be more out there, and really get themselves listening. And actually that same narrative is being told to people who identify as detail orientated or introverted.
Yeah.
And therefore they're being seen as almost like you won't. So what you're saying here, and actually what I'm saying is the narrative is, unless you change who you are in yourself, you will not be successful.
Yeah.
And I have my own opinions on that, and but I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Yes. So the introvert thing is really interesting. I know there are some statistics about like people at top level. It's like the one statistic I heard is like only 2% of CEOs are introverts. Like, obviously, I don't know how true that is, but I've certainly. So in my practice, I see about 50-50 men and women. So they either self-refer or they're referred by like somebody like you, other sort of presentation coaches. And what I find is I get some introverted men, definitely. And I think introversion has lots of, basically an introvert needs more time to formulate their thoughts. So a question thrown at somebody in a meeting, it can really blindside them, and it can really, really, really throw them, and they feel like massively on the spot. So, I mean, I think some people are better suited, and I think it's fine. Like, if you're not suited to a certain role, don't try and do it because it's going to be horrible. Do you know what I mean? If it just isn't like suited to your temperament, then it's just going to be awful. So don't try and do it if it's not going to be a good fit, because it won't help you and it won't help your company either. Basically, it's just going to be traumatic all around. It's like when me choosing the wrong subject at school because I thought more girls should do maths, and I chose maths, and I was rubbish. You know, it wasn't my thing. I was much better at other things. So
What about if there is a part of your role which you really want to, but potentially it's just that confidence, you're not as confident because as you just said, like things like getting a question thrown at you, you take a second, you just need a second. Now, I usually say that's where you need to own being able to pause and hold your space and take ownership.
definitely.
Um, but is there anything else that they can do to prepare themselves to really show up
I
the way that they want
I
to be?
think it's a really good idea if that is a problem, like talk it over with somebody, like talk it over with a friend or a therapist or somebody beforehand, before like meetings, and then get some strategies in your back pocket. So have some, like you said, like have the pause, um, have a few, maybe have an opening line of an answer prepared, even if you don't know what it's going to be, just to give you something to hold on to. And the other thing, of course, is to once again to manage your nerves. So because the more nervous you are in a moment like that, the more likely you are to go blank. And this happens to lots of my clients when they come and see me, is that they've come to see me because they've gone blank at an important moment, and that is the beginning of their trauma. And this can happen to extroverts. I've treated various extroverts who've never had a problem, then have a bad experience because they've gone blank, and that's the beginning of the problem. So it's definitely getting lots of strategies in your back pocket, so that, and then also if you do mess up, like you and I both confessed already in this, we both made some pretty epic mistakes during public. It's like, it's not the end of the world. Do you know, most of the time people aren't really going to be, they're not going to be thinking about you as much as you're going to be thinking about you as well. Do you know what I mean? They probably forgot about what you said, what I said. You and I still remember it, but they, you know, other people don't think about us the whole time. I've got news for you, but they just don't.
Yeah, yeah, and we were when we were off camera earlier today, we were chatting about the fact that kind of advice to see people in their underwear and things like that, and it can be really helpful for when you're going out in front of people just to calm yourself just slightly in a sense. But it's more that realization that um, you're when you will experience it so much more in and magnified than they will in a
Yes,
sense. And I very much believe it's about actually learning to fall and actually having that expectation that, do you know what, you will mess up. You will
exactly.
mess up,
And
and it's how you deal with it.
And I know that you're a parent, and for many of us, we learn basically when we're young. If I do something well, if I get a good mark, people will say, "Good girl," right? So
Mm.
the performance, the result is equated with how good and how beloved I am, basically, how much positive attention I get. So as adults, of course, we take this with us. So we have an epic fail, we think it means we're bad.
Yeah,
Genuinely, this is what we how we, and of course, this is what we've been taught. Instead of you saying to your little boy, like, "Oh, well done for doing this. That was a good job. You know, well done for trying. If even if he doesn't do something so well," instead of saying, "Oh, you're so great. You're so," it's
yeah.
a whole different thing.
It's
And as
it's like,
we
it's
still
grit,
have this.
isn't it? What they
Pardon?
call grit. Grit,
But
passion and perseverance, the love of doing it, the love of want of trying or
and this really
mm,
sucks because most of the time, as a grown up, I mean, there are things that I'm not naturally good at, that I don't enjoy doing anymore, like drawing, right? Because so I stopped doing it. So that we've lost that feeling of like, even if I'm not naturally gifted at something, I'll just avoid it. And avoidance is often the coping strategy that people have for things that are difficult. We just try and avoid them. We hide under the desk when the BBC calls and they need somebody to be on. That will, well, and my one of my clients said, "Oh, you normally try and shove it onto a colleague." because we want to avoid any opportunity where we might possibly fail, because if we fail, it means we are bad, basically.
Yeah. And this is particularly prevalent in finance training, so careers in finance, and less tech in a sense, but specifically in accounting, because it's a very binary learning process. It's very yes or no, right or wrong. In tech, actually, you get a lot more scope for trial and error, and really almost a freedom to explore. And it is about actually that the aim is to fail as many times as you can, so that then you know that you've got the best and right and
Yeah.
correct response or outcome. Whereas it's really difficult sometimes with speaking and delivering presentation, as you say, going on the BBC. And I'm now thinking about that chap who came on, and his kids came on before lockdown, before
Yes,
all our kids were coming on,
exactly.
and how he dealt with that, and how he kind of just remained stoic, and probably felt very, very, out of his comfort zone. But yeah, it's about having that freedom to explore and play, and realize that, um, in a sense, if you're going in there with this idea of a perfect performance, then you probably will fail,
Yeah.
because the expectation, whereas difficult because you want to have a high expectation about what you're delivering in
Of
terms of being
course.
high performance, but
Definitely. And
mm,
most of the time, of course, the people that I certainly treat, these are people that went to the best universities, they work at the best firms and stuff. So they've always been really good at stuff. Like, that's just who they are. And then to suddenly have something they're not as good at, it just feels awful. And it just that makes them question everything, basically. And often this is why that they are, once they've been sorted, they don't want to even say that they've had help with, so it's like,
yeah,
because it's such a personal thing, and I totally understand it. So no, it's really interesting. And of course, that thing about the state you described about being sort of a bit playful and like just sort of messing around, that's again that state of the nervous system I talked about, which is that sort of playful, curious side, which is also where we tend to have our best ideas as well, and like where the most innovation can happen too. So it's, you know the more we can get ourselves into that state, the better, basically. And then also, like, if we mess up, like, we won't be so absolutely mortified. We'll just be like, okay, okay. Because when we mess up and we're so mortified, and say, for example, we're on stage, and you and I, we're both, we have a lot of friends and colleagues who are professional speakers. And we've all seen lots of speakers on stage, even professional speakers, who look kind of nervous and really uncomfortable. And it makes us feel uncomfortable, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah, or you want to rescue them, you want to go on and say, it's okay, but it depends which ego response is in your head, as you
Oh
say,
my
because
God.
like before,
But,
that
but,
playful
but
ego, yeah.
exactly. So I remember, like, seeing a
Mm.
speaker once at a very, like, posh private members club, who had a she she persuaded the organizer that she was good at, that she could do public speaking, and she had her whole thing on the longhand on paper, and the whole way through, all I could see was her paper shaking. For the listeners, I'm shaking a piece of paper, and it's awful, and it's cringeworthy, and you sit there for like 45 minutes thinking, oh my God, it's just hideous. So somebody like that, it will have felt horrible for her, and she made the whole audience feel awful too.
And that is, do you know, we're needing to almost like kind of wrap up, but I just realized, because actually there was a conversation on LinkedIn that I just chimed in on as we are about to go on, and I said, oh, I will have more on this, and it was about the fact that actually, how do you remain confident, um, and steadfast when often, especially in finance, when you're delivering insights or delivering what has to happen, and someone described it to me this week as either you're telling them to spend to spend less or to sell more. Either way, you're not really delivering news that people want to hear. A lot of the time, you're kind of making their lives harder as that
Yeah.
finance role. So, how do we maintain that confidence, or even inject a bit more? Inject a bit more of that creativity and innovation and playfulness, if we're in a place of anxiety.
Yeah. Well, obviously, if we're talking about figures, we need to make sure that we're as sure as we can be of what we're telling people. Like some of my clients have this issue. And then think, okay, what I'm saying here will impact people's lives, and be totally aware that what you're saying means that people will adapt their behavior based on what you're saying. So it's a big responsibility. So, but then I don't know how playful you can be in that situation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's more about finding that confidence, and assurance, actually, potentially when you're not 100% sure. And being a perfectionist, you do want to be 100% sure, but almost you need to be able to, you need to be able to encourage them to explore. Like, it's the right tool or the right way to go. Um,
Then
and
I
you're
would
not
say
sure.
just be really honest as you can be.
Yeah.
And say, as far as we're aware, this is like the best figure. You know what I mean? And
Yeah. This is the best
because
way to go. This is what we need to
the
do.
last thing I want to start telling people is to start blustering, naming no
Yeah.
names, and just saying a load of stuff with a lot of bluster and confidence when in fact it's total BS, truth be told, right?
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
a lot of there is this book that I just referred to as well. It's Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders? By Dr. Timura Premasic. And he talks a lot about this stuff, like we want people to be conscientious.
Yeah.
We want people to be kind of we want people to be competent but not overconfident when there is no substance. Um, so I don't know how I can add playfulness into that sort of situation. Do you know what I mean? Because it is a big
Yeah.
responsibility.
It is difficult. So yeah, it's definitely one of my, I mean, that's what I love about what I do, because it is very much about having those people that have the integrity, that have the
Exactly.
competence, and making sure that they are actually the ones that are being listened to
What
rather than.
what I will sometimes do in the consulting room or the virtual consulting room is actually kind of play around with this a little bit before the person presents it, so we can have some fun with it. And often it sounds really counterintuitive, I will catastrophize with the client about all the things that could possibly go wrong when they speak, because the subconscious has already gone there. So I could say, well, of course you could say this figure and then the market will collapse. Do you know what I mean? Like, and because it will engage with some of their fears about what can happen. Does that make sense? So it's
Yeah.
about, so we can do that playful stuff sort of in the consulting room beforehand, which will then, when they deliver it, make them feel and sound a lot more confident and relaxed, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like I was interviewing this voice guy, Jimmy Cannon, and he said when he was a musician, his music teacher told them to put their saxophone, this really expensive instrument, on the floor and sort of just push it around with their foot. And because it would kind of help him, instead of just having to hold it the whole time like this, it actually it will stretch how far you can go with it. And so when you are holding it, you feel more relaxed, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. And I
I
think
think so.
that's
Yeah.
what I do with, let that sit with you. That's kind of what I do with clients, like before a big presentation.
Mm.
So all we've played around with this stuff and the tension and everything that can go wrong beforehand. So when they deliver it, they're more like Jacinda Ardern, you know, much more kind of relaxed and confident, but still strong as anything and authoritative as well. But you watch her, she isn't super uptight. You know, she does these Facebook lives with for her, you know, constituents, and she's like a leader, but she's relaxed, but she has authority.
Yeah.
Um, and she's not gonna basically BS anybody. She'll just she'll say, you know, the figures as they are. Do you know what I mean?
She says it straight,
She
but she
does.
says it also with, as you said, with authority, but also with an element of kindness.
And humility
Um,
as
yeah,
well.
humility.
And it
Yeah.
is about that thing. She genuinely, I think, wants to serve as well. So there isn't a huge amount of ego there,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that's another sort of state that links back to that quiet sort of confidence as well, and the competence. That's the thing. She has a lot of wisdom and political expertise, which is and what really shines through. And she isn't uptight about it.
And that is, I think that's actually the goal. So when you're going into a situation, you feel like your confidence is waning, is okay, what do I want to show up as today and what is in my way? So if you do have issues with anxiety, or if you do have something that's just bubbling up and you're thinking, oh, what if I blank? What if I'm, but, you know, as you said, that trauma of this panic happening and rising up. It's about being very clear on what you're trying to achieve, and then you can identify actually what's stopping you,
Yeah.
and have then a strategy to fix it. I've just been aware of what the time is, though, Olivia. So I want to say thank you so much. So where do we find more of you? More of how can we get in touch with you? Where are you? Give us your details.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. It's been such a pleasure. So people can go to my website, which is harleystreetcoach.com. Also, my biggest social platform is LinkedIn. I'm about 10,000 followers at the moment. So LinkedIn is really good. I am building up my YouTube channel. So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn and drop me an email if you have any questions. I'm happy to always give pro bono advice to people. So Olivia at harleystreetcoach.com for that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on. There's so much that we've learned today in terms of what we can do to really help. If you are suffering from something that you think might be actually a past trauma that's coming up, or something that's happening physically or mentally with you that you think, yes, actually, I want to have a strategy to be able to manage that. And then I can go on and learn how to be a really great presenter then, or have those communication skills, then do get in touch with Olivia. Or if you want to contact me first, that's absolutely fine, and just let us know what it's worth exploring it, basically, because it could hold you back, not just now short term, but long term as well. And actually, it is the long game to think about. And that, yeah, I'd definitely say having those strategies can then just open up so much more opportunities, not just for you actually, but also for the people around you and the organizations who
Definitely.
rely on your skills. So that is fantastic. So that's it for today.